What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Virgin New Vlog. How y'all doing? I'm doing all right. Nice start, but anyway, so cool. Today's entry, I have something very interesting for you. Okay, I want to talk about kind of my latest revelation, if you will, right? And it's something that kind of like it's one of those things. It's like my entry I did about like the nature of the infinite and the infinitesimal. Like it's one of those kinds of things, but like it's a bit more practical than that, right? So like today I want to talk about the four archetypes of artists, or the four artistic archetypes, right? And this actually is kind of me stealing, right? Like an already kind of very well established kind of framework, which is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, right? So like that's a book that's about the masculine archetypes, and it's a very, very good book. I highly recommend it. It's very, very interesting. It kind of describes the journey, or it kind of lays out this hierarchy of like masculine archetypes that range from boyhood or an infancy all the way to like mature masculinity, right? So like yeah, it's a very, very, very good book and a very interesting idea, but like I wanted to use like borrow that framework, right, for basically this entry, right? So like yeah. So, as you know, right, I hope, as I hope you know, like I am an artist, right? You know, specifically I'm a musician, right? And well, not only, you know, if you're an artist yourself, then you know obviously like the journey of the artist is to master your craft and to kind of like master your craft and to become efficient in the way that you work and to always be learning and improving, but also, you know, the practical challenges of like, you know, learning to receive from it, right? So like I made an entry commenting on that actually, called like are you screwed as an artist or creative, right? So I'll link that in the end screen. But so yeah, like, but aside from all of those things, you also may entertain, and I certainly do a lot of the time, the kind of, well, or like you kind of ask, you kind of think about like, okay, like what does it mean to be an artist? You know, what responsibility do I have as an artist? Like, what am I trying to do as an artist, right? Which is kind of a more metaphysical question, right? And really, yeah, so this is something that I think about a lot, right? And yeah, and as such, like I've kind of like derived some very interesting insights. Not only interesting, but also useful for me because like aside from being an artist type, like I'm also a healer type, you know. I guess a light worker would be another way of looking at it, right? But like and as a healer type, I'm trying to bring light and beauty into the world. And so like that's you could label that as kind of my like subcategory, right? You know, like if you're looking at it in terms of like my purpose, right? So like, well, yeah, it depends on how you look at it, but like, you know, like either you look at it like that I'm an artist and as such I'm an artist healer, or that I'm a healer and therefore I'm a healer artist, right? It really depends on how you look at it, right? Which end you start with first, the physical or the metaphysical. But yeah, and like basically I had an idea about I had an idea to marry like this question that I readily post, that I regularly kind of think about and pose to myself, and also this framework of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, right? And so yeah, I mean really I found that the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover archetypes actually correspond really well with types of artist in terms of like the kind of role that they play in making art, right? So like if you're an artist or, you know, or creative yourself, then you might find this interesting and insightful. But so basically, so I'm going to go along each archetype and explain how each archetype, you know, manifests as an artistic role, and then discuss that basically. So the first archetype is the king, right? And the king is a masculine archetype that is basically like the leader, basically, right? You know, in some ways it's pretty self-explanatory. All of these are really king, warrior, magician, lover, but like yeah, the king is like the individual that is manifesting the archetype of king, and therefore people kind of look up to them, right? And the king's role is to kind of govern like his kingdom, right? Whether that kingdom be an actual kingdom, right, like a geographical kingdom, or it be like an internal or a social kingdom, right? And therein lies the parallel, is that like the king is a very readily recognizable archetype. If anything, it's kind of one of the most primal, I suppose, right? Because like the king derives from the divine child, right? Which is like basically the first archetype that we see in a newborn baby boy, right? Is this kind of like mystical almost quality of someone to kind of inspire people to fall under their leadership, right? Because of respect, compassion, you know, and things of that nature. Like, you know, people just kind of feel the sense of inspiration and respect and trust towards this king archetype, right? So it's a very kind of socially involved kind of an archetype, right? And so like the first type of artist or artistic archetype is that of the king, aka the social artist, right? So the social artist is basically an artist that exists to kind of act as a kind of like symbol of celebration and like kind of collective happiness and expression, right? Which is a very long-winded way of saying like the artist, the social artist, aka the king archetype artist, is your like mainstream celebrity, basically. You know, your mainstream celebrity is, or like someone who kind of like approaches art from a very kind of like, I guess, standard, you know, sense, is fulfilling this social artist role, right? Social artists, you know, they're actually like they're you know, and this isn't really a judgment, and like I don't mean it to be a judgment, but like social artists are like the most shallow type of artist in a sense, because like the art that they're making is not very deep, right? Instead, like their art is aimed at like serving a very distinct and solid social role, right? You know, like when you have musicians that perform, right, your celebrity musicians, or like traditionally what have been like, you know, musicians of that nature, or you have like people who are instantly recognizable as celebrities, right? Or like people like who do things that are simple, you know, again, like simple in their in their kind of function, really. It's really like what the kind of art that they make, whether that be actual art or whether that be like something else, like a product or service that they provide as an entrepreneur, right? Or even just like, yeah, someone who is enlisted by an organization to do a certain thing, right? They are aiming to just cater to society in a very like frank and evident way, and there's really no like esotericism or like thing of or anything like that. There's no kind of like weird like individualistic kind of like infusing, you know, into the art. It's just like, you know, they're artists, and like they're artists that kind of, they're artists of the people, right? Let's just say, right? So that's the first type. The second archetype is the warrior archetype, right, of artist, right? And this is basically your rebellious artist, right? So your rebellious artist makes art that is shocking, really. So like this is like what people would call the edgelords, right? You know, and the people who like make stuff that is shocking and like kind of forces you to like behold something that isn't necessarily pleasant, right? And it's not always shocking for the sake of being shocking. It's just like it always has an impact, right? And from there, you know, we can infer that like people of this like or art of this type is aimed at kind of like showing something, and it's a very emotional thing. It's like usually it's something like and I guess I don't really like the word, but dominance, right? You know, it's like people want to show to the world that they're the shit, right? And like the way they do that is to produce art that's shocking and like that is unexpected and taboo, right? And it's like you may not like me, but you're gonna fucking talk about me, right? You know, and it's like this. It's in some ways it's kind of narcissistic, I suppose, right? But like, but yeah, but that's another type of art that you see, right, on the internet, you know, in other art forms like that, right? So that's the second type. The third archetype is the magician, right? And the magician archetype is the artist that is concerned with quality and technical brilliance, right? So this is another type of artist that you or art that you will see, you know, in the landscape of art, is like art that is avant-garde almost, right? It's like it's experimental, right? And it is like very, very esoteric, right? It's very, very esoteric. You know, it takes a lot of like analysis and thinking to actually appreciate and grasp such that, you know, you kind of have to be like a similar kind of artist to actually appreciate art like this, right? So like, whereas like, you know, obviously the king type of artist, right, the social artist, they make art that's very, very what you see is what you get, right? And if anything, it's what most people would consider as art, right? Because like it's the most accessible form of art to the layperson, right? You know, when people think of art who aren't like, you know, aficionados of art, like they think of like, you know, the celebrities and the mainstream art out there, right? And then like when you get to the, you know, the rebellious art, right, you know, it's still recognizable, right? You know, it's just that like the social art is a bit more kind of like, you know, socially acceptable, right? You know, and like it's kind of easier. It's kind of like not as impactful in the sense that like, you know, it's just nice art, right? It's just art that's made and like people consume it and like it's all great, right? You know, everyone's happy. But the rebellious art is, you know, is more shocking and impactful, but people still recognize it, right? You know, it's still something that people can easily kind of connect with, right? It's just that it tends to be more unpleasant, right, and shocking. However, like when we get to the magician type of art, right, the technical artist, basically, right, like it's often very esoteric, and like unless you are also on a journey towards technical brilliance in that art form, or you have like an affinity to like art that, you know, art or things that are more esoteric, then it will fall on deaf ears, right? People just won't understand it, right? It's just too esoteric, right? But like the desire, the goal of technical artists, the artists of the magician archetype, they're striving for technical brilliance. They're striving not only for technical brilliance, but also, you know, new ways of encapsulating performances, new ways of articulating things, right? New ways of like new narratives, right? So it's not just in terms of technique, right? Where like they're always like looking for like new media, right? You know, like what's the next thing that we can do with technology, right? You know, what's the next thing we can do with technology? And like, yeah. And besides that, there's also like they also like want to keep like, yeah. It's not just about the technique, but it's also about the narrative, right? So like, you know, for example, like, yeah, like in like narrative driven media, like, you know, you might see like kind of increasingly like subversive or progressive narratives where like usually there's like a strong ideological agenda, and like these people are trying to say something that's like modern, right? They're trying to kind of present a viewpoint, a narrative, a way of thinking that has never been done before, right? So like these artists are striving for like novelty, for like excellence, for like they're always pushing the boundary of what's possible, right? And that's their core interest, and that's what their art kind of represents and like and serves as in terms of function, right? And lastly, we have the lover archetype, right? And this is where I belong primarily, right? And the lover archetype is, I don't know if I'd use the word esoteric, but I would definitely say difficult to pin down, right? The lover's role in art is difficult to pin down, and not only that, it's kind of difficult to like, because it's difficult to pin down and to pinpoint, right? It's also difficult to kind of communicate, right? And therefore to kind of sell to people, because what the lover is concerned about is making people feel something, right? Is to like is to have, in the same way that the rebellious artist has an impact on you, but it's more of like a transcendent, spiritual, holistic type of a vision, right? So this is a vision that transcends imagery. It's a vision that transcends other sensations. It's a vision that transcends categorization and genre most of the time, if not all the time. You can't categorize it, right? It's just a feeling, you know. You have a feeling that you want to infuse in your art, right? You want to show people really what it is like a deep spiritual, or even I would say, but it's kind of a bit loaded, religious experience, right? There is like, I mean, if you look at kind of like old traditional songs and like and scriptures and stuff of that nature, then like you will find that like there is, you know, obviously there is the symbolic element of those things, like in the sense of like they're describing the lives of someone like Jesus, or, you know, whoever it might be, Muhammad. But like there's something about those things that kind of conjure up like a deeper feeling in you, right? So like it's difficult to kind of like quantify or even really describe what someone of this like the art of this temperament, but like it's your Disney, right? It's your Disney. It's all of these things that kind of make that have like a deeper, more transcendent, more spiritual element to them, right? And so yeah, so, you know, Disney is an example. Like I can give you examples specifically of these kinds of art. So like social artists, I don't know, any celebrity, right? Ed Sheeran, right? You know, really, or like any other artist, right? You know, anyone who's in the public eye and like they're artists and they do their thing and they're everywhere and like they're kind of leading the mainstream kind of wave of like of art, really, right? And it's like you know, you ask someone about art, right? Who's your favorite artist? Oh, Ed Sheeran, right? It's the artist that's closest to the people, right? If you want to think of it that way. Rebellious artist, right? I actually have a very, really good example of this, right? There's a channel on YouTube called Filthy Frank, right? It's no longer active, right? The Filthy Frank is a persona that was made by someone, right? But like that channel, when it was live and kicking, was all about fucking shock and pranking people and doing disgusting things that shock you and just like you're like, what the fuck is going on, right? You know, pranks and like just like like talking like really openly and like obnoxiously about taboo subjects in like in an attempt to like actually to shock people, right? You know, like you know, and and it's like behind all of that, you have a feeling, right? You have a feeling that it's like yeah, like it's like you get a feeling that the person is like has a big fucking finger up to you, right? It's like fuck you, right? This is our motherfucker, you know. You didn't see that shit coming, did you, right? And it's that kind of a feel, right? Technical artists. Um, okay. Well, yeah. Okay, I can think of a few examples, right? There's a guy called Jordan Rudess, right, and he's a keyboard player, right? And he's one of many examples, but like he's one that's really fun to mention because like he's basically a musician, right? And he's well known, if in case you don't know who he is, right? He's well known for like embracing all kinds of music called technology, like anything that's ever been released, he's probably played it, right? You know, and he's really all about like you know like new instruments, new technology, and new ways of making music, right? New ways of conceptualizing of music, right? You know. And yeah, it's just that energy. I mean, it's like there's a lot of this in obviously like the technological, like Silicon Valley type of thing, right? You know, it's like iPhones and computers and virtual reality and augmented reality and things like that, right? You know, there's a ton of that, right? You know, just like gadgets and like yeah, technology, right? The advance of technology and like the kind of constant progression of like ways of conveying things, you know, that's the magician, right? The lover archetype is your Disney, like I said, right? So yeah, so like this was really an interesting discovery for me because it kind of makes sense, right? So right there, you know, you can see this illustration. I think I'm gonna put my light on. You can see this illustration of like these various types of artists, right? And it's like maybe if you're an artist yourself, you can kind of identify where your kind of your kind of core focuses are, right? And like I guess if you're watching this channel, then you're probably like me, right? So like you know the person who's like trying to bring like deep feelings, right? Like that kind of go beyond just like words and like imagery and narratives and genres and categorizations, but it's more about like this feeling of like profundity, you know, that lies in the spiritual and the metaphysical and the mystical, right? You know, there's like magic basically, right? But and I know that's magician, right? But magic in terms of things that cannot be said, right? But things that can only be experienced, right? And it's that depth of experience that we're about, right? But like, it's tempting for me, you know, to myself think and to also myself kind of appear to be giving the message of, you know, okay, so that's your type, you know it now, go ahead and do it, right? And it's like, that's not necessarily my message, although like, it is useful to know your strengths, right? You know, whenever you learn something about yourself or whenever like, you know, like there's kind of like a framework like this, right? It's useful to know where your strengths lie and your weaknesses lie. But like, in fact, like there is a role for all of these people, right? There's a role for all of these people. You know, you need people, right? You need art that is accessible to as many people as possible, right? Because it just so happens that like most people don't have access, you know, or even have the interest to kind of like seek out like deeper forms of art, right? And like maybe all that they really want is just like art that's accessible and simple to understand, you know, that they can enjoy with everyone else, right? So that's the role of the social artist or the king archetype, right? Is reach. The social artist has reach. They can reach many people, right? The rebellious artist, you know, they show things to people that no one else in their right minds would show to people, right? You know, in their desire to kind of like stand out and like and show themselves this like you never saw me coming type of a way, like to have that impact, right? It's shocking and it's often like distasteful, but like what they do is to provide impact, right? Because sometimes there is stuff that like is not so pleasant, right? But is still there and needs to be said or expressed, right? And it also has that competitive energy around it that might be useful because it kind of riles people up so that they can get out of like their kind of like apathy and like just numbness and like, oh, I don't really right, for someone to come and like punch them in the face essentially, you know, like, hey bitch, you know, here's a penis for you, right, or whatever, right? And it's like, oh my god, and it's like it kind of riles people up, right? And it kind of creates this energy, right? You know, and you and like, you know, you could say that like potentially it's like a bit, it's sometimes it's not useful to always be part of that energy, right? You know, but it's still something that kind of like brings people out of like this state of like nothingness and into something, right? And also it kind of like it has the balls. It has the balls and the courage to show things that might actually need to be shown, right? Even though they're fucking distasteful and disgusting and like reprehensible. But like for someone to show that, they're still kind of bringing consciousness to that thing, right? And so like sometimes you need artists and art like this to just like pummel your kind of wall of like where you're being unconscious about certain areas of your life, right? You know, so the rebellious artist has impact, right? Impact, that kind of like impact that's needed to kind of wake you up, right? The technical artists, they represent brilliance, skill, quality, right? They represent novelty, right? They are about like kind of exploration and novelty and freshness, basically, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious, self-evident, like why magicians are important, right? Or like the art of magicians, right? It's like they derive the new ways of doing things, right? They're the jazz artists that like kind of fucking did all this crazy shit, right? In like the 1900s, right? Throughout the 1900s, right? And just like made all of this shit available to us, right? All of this jazz harmony and theory knowledge, right? These crazy experimental people, right? You know, at the time people were like, what the fuck is this fucking racket, right? But now it's like it's like part of this, like it's something that enriched like the musical kind of like landscape, right? You know, you need people who are like, I'm gonna build the next fucking social media platform, or I'm gonna build something that obsolesces social fucking media. I'm gonna be the one who does the next best thing, right? And it's like this kind of and it's like, yeah, it's just this desire to progress, right? You know, and to improve, you know, and to continuously improve, right? So, you know, it's pretty obvious why this is important, right? You know, if you didn't have these people, like, you wouldn't have all of these cool techniques that you have at your disposal in whatever you're doing, right? Because it's these people that keep pushing the envelope to always discover new things and new and interesting ways of doing things, right? So the technical artists, they're about, what word would I give it? Excellence, I guess. Excellence would be the word I use, right? And then finally, the lover artist, right? I didn't actually give a word for this, but like, I guess the heart-centered artist, or like the sensitive artist. Okay, the sensitive artist, I'll say that. So the sensitive artist, right? They breathe life into that which has lost life, right? And that's important, obviously, right? Because, well, it's something that most people aren't concerned with on a daily basis, right? But, you know, for those of us who are more sensitive, like, we see that there's like this kind of this dreariness in society that like is a direct result of a lack of soul, right? So this is what the lover archetype, the sensitive artists provide, is soul and heart, right? They remind people, they reconnect people with the vital essence of their soul and their heart, right? You know, and they make people cry because they're experiencing things that like they haven't experienced since they were children, right? They basically facilitate spiritual awakening and spiritual progression. You know, people realize things when they behold the art of the sensitive artists, right? It's like, this is existence, right? And it's like the love and the fear and like all of the complex emotionality that goes into living that we shove down, right? In today's like secular society, let's say, right? All of that stuff is reintroduced when the sensitive artist puts their soul and heart into their work and shows it to the people. Right? But like as an artist yourself, you can see how each and every one of these is important. Right? Each and every one of these is important. Right? You know, you may not be strong in some of these areas, but like it's interesting to think about what role that each of these archetypes present to us, and how we can then like, you know, own our strengths, right? You know, understand our strengths, but also like think in terms of like the other areas where like, you know, someone else, for example, or we can find some other way of like kind of fulfilling those roles, right? So yeah, that's the whole spectrum to my mind, unless, you know, I just came up with this, right? I thought it was really, really, really interesting, but like, yeah, so we go from the most accessible, but also the most shallow, to like the most profound, but also the least accessible, right? Because it's not even physically like pertinent, right? You know, because it's like as a lover artist, I can say that like it's like, well, even though like the magicians, right? You know, the technical artists, like even though they're esoteric, at least like they work like on things that people recognize, right? You know, people, it's you know, they usually create things and concepts, and like those are at least things that people can abstract, right? Whereas like how do you explain to someone what you do as a sensitive artist, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, like I make people feel good with my art. I make people feel ecstasy with my art, and it's like people are like, okay, you know. Like imagine if you went to like, you know, some rando on the street, right? And like the technical artist is like, oh, like here's a piece of music, or like here's a piece of technology that I built, and it's like they may not be able to know what it is, but they're like, but like the magician can show them what it does, and like they'll be like, oh, cool, this is awesome, right? Maybe it's not very practical, but it's awesome, right? You know, and it's at least conceptually understandable, right? But like as a sensitive artist or someone, you know, who's doing something that's like deeper, it's like, I want to make people feel good, and you try and explain, you know, to someone on the street, and they're like, okay, bro, cool, and they walk on, right? You can't. It's like you can use words. You can be like, yeah, like I want to make art that's really poignant and makes people feel really deep emotions, and that connects them to spirit and mysticism and like all of this deeper stuff that people don't focus on normally, right? And like they'll be like, cool, right? Maybe other sensitive artists will know what you're doing, right? But like the only way that you can like reach these people is by making art, right? You know, like you don't have the luxury of being able to explain to people what you're trying to do, right? You have to do it so that people can feel it, so that they can be, so that's what you were doing, right? And I'll end with this, right? So it's, if I were to ask you what type of artist was prevalent in this era, like how would you reply me, right? And if you said magician, then like we'd be in agreement, right? Because like obviously like we're like riding this wave of like the technological age, right? So like it's been the era of the magician, right? And not to say that that any of these archetypes were missing, like they weren't. They were all present throughout the history of human civilization, right? They had to have been, but like this age that we find ourselves in is really and truly the age of the magician, right? The technical artists, because they like it's like this kind of like global focus on like innovation and like and this right, innovation and technology and knowledge and like narratives and like new ways of seeing things and new ways of thinking and new spiritual truths and all of this stuff, right? Build your perspective, motherfucker, Bojinjin. Like vlog channel, right? But like, and like in the past, obviously, like the king archetype and the warrior archetype are they're more like relevant to the history of the world, right? Because like you could argue that like there was a period in time, or like there have been times as like the human civilizations were developing that there was a lot of war, right? And therefore like the energy that was required then was the warrior energy, right? And then like at the very beginning of the formation of human civilization, there needed to be a leader that stood up and everyone trusted and respected that could lead a group of people like into a prosperous future, right? So you could argue it's like king first, then warrior, right? Once boundaries needed to be enforced, right? Then now the magician, right? So what lies after that? The lover, right? And it's like I'm not like maybe I'm trying to be like it's my time to shine now, but like I mean this has kind of been a low-key message on my channel, right? It's not something I say very like I say it very seldomly, right? It's not something I state explicitly, but like being a sensitive healer type myself, a light worker, right? And like probably whoever's watching this too, right? It's like yes, like we live in this world that's very well like mediated, right? That like is like very technologically advanced, right? But like the thing that's kind of missing in people's lives is like meaning, right? And significance and a sense of connection and a sense of sensitivity to like their own subjective experiences, right? Because like the whole world to everyone is like this kind of machine that you have to like keep up with, right, in order to survive. But like people as such lack this like more like this deeper, more transcendent part of life that like things like world religions used to do for people, right? Everyone has their own opinions on religion, right? I don't particularly I'm not particularly like big endorser of like religion, right? And that's kind of an understatement, but like I know that like I know that art is getting distracted. I know that like what was I saying? Damn it, I lost my train. What was I saying? Like, regardless, right? Like, religions, right? So like, you can everyone has their opinions on religions, right? Like, blah blah blah. Like, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna get into it. It's too controversial. But like, basically, like, but something that religions did for people that like is kind of lost to the sands of time now is to provide them with spiritual experiences, deep experiences, be like experiences where they can kind of transcend like the daily kind of like mundane existence that they live in, where like it's all about management and like and survival, right? To kind of connect to something deeper that is profoundly part of no one part of human history, but all of it, right? And therefore I feel that like the next burst is going to be the burst of the sensitive artist, right? And I'm very excited for that. So like, what this means is like, if you're a sensitive artist yourself, like, tap into your what you feel, tap into like the kinds of like beautiful visions that you see, the kinds of like beautiful feelings that you want to that exist within yourself, and like in all of the things that you find beautiful, that you want to infuse in your art, whether that be actual art like me doing music, or like whether that be in business, whether that be in the service, whether that be in the relationships that you have with other people, right? You want to bring that like beauty, that like ineffable beauty, like, and just like connection with like the divine into the world, right? Into the people that, like, into the lives of the people that you love, into your art, right? So cool. I'll leave you guys with that. I hope this was a very like, it was I hope this was a good entry for you. It was certainly a very exciting realization for me. But yeah. And if you have any thoughts or any comments of that, of the nature of, yes, my mind is stopping now. So, but yeah, okay. So I better stop this. But like, yeah, so cool. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And yeah, until next time, guys, I will catch you then. Until then, stay safe, stay you, stay cool. I love you, and keep going. And if you're an artist, watch out, because I'm coming for you. No, I'm joking. Let's all keep going, right? You know, I believe in you. I believe in me. Let's go towards the future. So cool. Until next time, guys. Peace out.